Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and man, I really appreciate you guys making some time out of your day to hang out with me a little bit and check the video out. Really appreciate that. And guys, today we're sort of going to give you all a complete guide to catching bass in the early fall of the year, which without a doubt, in my opinion, is the toughest time of year to catch fish. We are in the toughest time of year right now, you know, August and September, but there starts to be some patterns emerge in the first part of September into early fall that I really want to clue you guys in on, sort of give you guys my experience, some things that have worked for me, and I think it might lead to a little bit more success this fall if you're struggling in the past falls to catch bass. Also, guys, just a quick invitation. I just want to invite everybody, anyone interested in becoming a channel member here to Intuitive Angling. All you have to do is go to my YouTube homepage and you can click on the little thing that says join for information. And channel members get extra videos every week that aren't seen by the public and some access to my personal email address for fishing questions. And also, please hit that subscribe button. If you don't want to join as a member, just hit that subscribe button. It's free and easy and really appreciate that. Okay guys, we are in the middle of the tough time of year to catch fish. There's a lot of different reasons for that. Before I get into the actual techniques and lures we're going to talk about, there's a lot of different factors involved here. First of all, you usually have some of the warmest water temperatures in the early fall. Water temperatures maybe are starting to cool off a little bit, but you don't really see any significant cooling. You got a little bit shorter daylight hours coming in. You've got some normally dropping water levels, and normally the water is also starting to clean up a little bit by the late fall. And you have a lot of bass using a lot of different water columns. You got bass fish deep, suspended, shallow, in between. They're all over the place. In the early fall time of the year, you very rarely find bass that are schooled up in large schools. They're normally just here and there. So there's a lot of individual roamers. There's a lot of fish chasing shad. It's just a lot of stuff going on. Fish up shallow, feeding on perch, a lot of different variables there. So I want to get into you guys. I want to give you guys sort of a comprehensive tutorial on how to catch fish, real bass fishing. We're not going to talk about spotlighting here because you don't even need to know seasonal patterns to spotlight for bass. But for real bass fishing, we're going to get into some hardcore hogging techniques that I think is really going to help you out. So what I want to do, I've got 6 lures here that seem to work pretty good for me in the early fall of the year. And I sort of want to go over each lure and sort of explain to you what I'm looking for as far as the type of water and how I fish it. And there's definitely going to be something in here for everybody as far as the water you guys fish. So there's 2 different things to consider here in regards to the mood and the personality of the fish. You got to understand if the bass are in a chasing mood or if they're more dormant. So if they want a slow bait or a fast bait. In general, I probably prefer most of the time some type of a moving bait to generate a reaction strike, with the exception of 2 situations I'm going to talk about with slow baits here. But there's sort of a paradox that exists here between fall, because in the early fall, I either like to go big or real small, not much in between. So that's sort of what we're going to talk about here in today's video. So the first bait I want to talk about, guys, as far as if the fish do not want to chase and the fishing conditions are a little bit tough and you have some stained water conditions, guys, is a black zoom trick worm. I usually Texas rig this on an 1/8 ounce or 3/16 ounce sinker, and I flip it and pitch it around just whatever shallow cover it is. It can be lay down woods, boat docks, if you got cattails, lily pads, anything like that, any type of shallow cover. A black trick worm, for whatever reason, not any of the color, just a solid black trick worm on a light sinker, just methodically pitching it and flipping it around shallow cover, is a big producer for me. And I really like it if the water visibility is sort of in that, less than 15-inch range. Preferably, I like it around maybe, say, 6 to 10 inches of visibility. Dirty, off-colored water is going to work really good for that. It's a really good way to catch them, just pitching it and flipping it around any type of cover like that. The second with that is the second slow bait I'm going to talk about before we get into the horizontal baits, is another slow bait, but it's a larger bait, and that is a full-size jig. Guys, this is the new Blaukat Throwback jig from Cumberland Lures. You can get them at Tackle Warehouse. I'll put the link in the description to the Throwback jig. And also, guys, I'll link every one of these lures in my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of this video if you guys would like to pick one up. But this is my Blaukat Throwback jig. This is a 5/16 ounce. That's a heavy, full-size jig with a Zoom super chunk behind it. Now, this is the paradox that we're talking about here. I just talked about the Zoom trick worm. It's a finessey, it's a small bait for those, finicky, hard to catch fall bass. But the big jig works along in the same conditions. Stained water, shallow cover. The difference is normally I'm throwing the jig in a little bit thicker cover. Say for example, the trick worm's gonna work good pitching it around next to a dock piling or an isolated stump or a lay down tree or something. But the jig is gonna be really good in the same conditions, those dirty water conditions, if you have a little bit more complex cover. So say the thicker lily pads, thicker grass beds, thicker reeds. Say if you've got a lay down tree that has got a bunch of branches on it and it's really gnarly, just thicker cover, the big jig will generate strikes. And here's the difference. It's like light sinker on the trick worm for finessey presentation, heavy jig to create a reaction strike on the big jig on the Blaukat Throwback jig. So a lot of it has to do with the mood and personality. If I'm flipping and pitching shallow cover in the fall, early fall, I usually have both of these tied on. I'll have my big jig on there, I'll have the trick worm on there, and I try to just determine what the fish want day in and day out. So you don't really know. I mean, that's the whole thing about it. One thing about it is on those low light conditions, like earlier in the morning, late in the evening, or if you do have a cloudy day, the jig sometimes produces better and the worm a little bit better on brighter conditions. Okay, so that's probably 25% of my fall fishing, my early fall fishing right there is those two baits there. The other 75% lay in this 4 different lures I'm gonna talk about too. I've got 2 crankbaits and 2 topwaters. So first of all, let's talk about the 2 topwaters. The 2 topwaters I use are a full size, it's a Whopper plopper 130 and a big buzzbait. This is the Megabass Jamaican boa buzzbait. It's a 3/4 ounce large buzzer. Again, I'll link all these stuff in the description if you guys want to try one. This is probably my #1 early fall way to catch bass. I can catch bass on all the stuff I'm talking about, but if you told me and say, Randy, you can have 2 lures and you've got to go out the end of August, the first part of September and catch bass, these are the 2 that I would have right here, a big Whopper plopper and the big Megabass Buzzbait. And I would just freaking cover water. That's the whole thing about it. You're after those rogue shallow bass that are up shallow and they're feeding on anything they can get. They're feeding on a perch, they're feeding on a bullfrog, they're feeding on a snake in the water, they're feeding on a crawdad. They're up hunting bass and they're in that warm, shallow, hot water. And what I really want to look for is I want cleaner water. And this is something doesn't really make sense, but it's something that works in the early fall. These 2 techniques are for cleaner water. So I like to have visibility in the water of at least 3 feet. If you guys have a lake that has 4, 5, 6 foot of visibility, you're still going to be able to catch the fish on these, in the early fall. And I'm not talking just about on low light conditions. I'm talking about on bright sunny days, any type of condition. There's a shift in the mood of the bass that occurs from July, August, and into September. And one of the big shifts that you're going to notice with that is that transition to the big topwater plugs. And if you look back at a lot of tournament results that, especially a lot of tournament results prior to spotlighting for bass, but back when people had the option of fishing like deeper with 2D sonar or down imaging or whatever versus a shallow pattern, most all the tournaments this time of year, excuse me, in the early fall are one shallow. Back when they had Bassmaster Classics this time of year in the early fall and late summer, almost always were one in shallow water. So those are the 2. Now the other 2 are crankbaits for finesse cranking situations. And these 2 things that I'm going to talk about here are probably going to catch you the most fish. The other baits I'm talking about, like the topwaters and the slow baits, will catch you some quality fish. But these are going to be the 2 for the tough fishing conditions just to get bit, like catch lots of keepers. First one is a little 1/4 ounce Rattletrap. I like chrome and blue or some type of a shad pattern, just the old school cheap 1/4 ounce Rattletrap that you can get at Walmart or Tackle Warehouse or anywhere. And then the Megabass, this is the Super Z1. This is not the Super Z2 I talk about. This is the little tiny square lip model. This thing runs down about 3 feet. And here again, I'm looking for stained water, shallow cover with both of these lures. It's like, if I'm fishing them in early fall, I really want that water visibility around 12 inches. That's gonna be ideal. If I'm fishing a lot of rock and it's like rocky banks, flat banks, dirty water and rocky banks, The little 1/4 ounce Rattletrap is going to be really, really good, especially if you have some wind. And if you have a mix of like rock and wood, lay down trees, you know, stumps in the water, lay down logs, whatever like that, and you got rocky banks here and there, riprap, this little Megabass Super Z1 is deadly. It's a little finessey crankbait, catch a ton of fish on that. So anyway, guys, that's the main thing. The overall gist of this whole thing, as far as the complete guide to early fall fishing, is go shallow. Go really, really shallow. Every one of these techniques that I talk about here today, I'm talking about fishing water that is less than 5 feet deep, and preferably water that is like 2 to 3 foot deep. And this is the most consistent way that I have found to catch them, by far over fishing any other depth. But for suspended fish, deep fish, mid-level depth, I can usually go out and be competitive in almost any tournament I fish with those 6 techniques I talked about, anywhere between like now into the mid part of September. So anyway, guys, hope it helps out, and we'll talk later.